Okay. Are we live? I'm just double checking right now.
We are live.
Yeah, we are live. Let me share it because holy smokes, what happened to my Wi-Fi? Well, either which way, we are here.
Hello.
And we're live with candidate for Attorney General Ken Krayeske.
Hi. Hey, Elise, Assad, how's everybody doing?
Pretty good. Excited to be here with you.
I'm excited to be here. It's awesome.
Really?
I tried to do this a couple weeks ago and it couldn't happen. Now, Willie's putting the baby to bed, and
doing well.
And so let's talk lawyer in Connecticut.
Yes, because you weren't always a lawyer.
I was a journalist for a long time. And that
you were more than a journalist when you think about it. But go ahead.
Well, that's how I know you, right? We. So when this, just out of curiosity, when this circles out, what is it doing?
Huh?
Do you lose me when it, like, my camera circles? Does it lose me?
Oh, you pixelate a little bit, but it's cool. We can hear you.
All right. So yeah, I worked at the Hartford Advocate. I worked at High Times Magazine, and then I also started this after-school program called Echoes from the Streets.
Yep.
Which was really one of the greatest things that I've ever been involved with. We had teams of people armed with cameras and pens and notebooks and computers, and the Hartford printed the paper. And we had an office in the Civic Center Mall, and the Federal Department of Labor and the State Department of Labor provided funding to pay students for after-school work. And it really was a phenomenal program. We got money from DCF, and we did. Everybody likes to talk about listening to kids, but as soon as you give them the power of the press, boy, do they not want to hear what kids have to say.
Yeah, they didn't want to hear what we had to say at all. Because I remember you coming to Long Lane, and we got to completely lambast the conditions in there with your help.
And I never got invited back after we did it. And for obvious reasons, that DCF doesn't want bad. I got in trouble. And what really got me in trouble, though, is I was in a cell and somebody wrote, "I hate myself and I would die," and fuck bitch on the wall. And I wrote a letter to the DCF contract people that we were working with. And I said, this is kind of bad. It doesn't seem to me that this is an appropriate condition of confinement. I don't think I use words precisely. Condition, it sounds more like lawyer talk. But I remember writing after that, I was disinvited from returning to law.
Now while you pixelate and we're hearing most of what you said, I have to fill in the blanks. So I was one of the girls who DCF provided horrible education. So you actually prepared me more to write college essays than DCF schooling did. So between Ken Krayeske and East Hartford Public Schools, that's the only way I was able to make it through college.
Oh, well, I'm glad to hear that. It's an honor to hear stuff like that. It's a bummer that Echoes, we partnered with Our Piece of the Pie.
Yep, because I was also upstairs in the nail place with Alberta Winbush.
Yes.
So I was doing both.
Miss Winbush. So, we partnered with Our Piece of the Pie, and there was a schism in leadership at Our Piece of the Pie between Bob Rath and my hero, Alan McKenzie. And
Bob
Alan
Rath, I get to hear this from one of the adults in the situation. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And so, basically, we went into, when we did the Youth Business Incubate, Alan started Our Piece of the Pie as a division of South End Community Services.
Yep. And you could only live in certain locations for South End Community Services. So I was living on Garden Street at the time.
And so it was pitched though as a youth business incubator, which is you put the egg in the incubator and you get a chicken, and then the chicken goes free. And as soon as we got to our piece of the pie, Alan built a series in portfolio of businesses that included Miss Windbush, it included River Rights Boat Builders, included Echoes from the Streets, it included Junior Art Makers, and it had this huge contract with DCF, and it brought in more money than South End Community Services' actual budget.
Now, I was referred by DCF. Did you have to be a DCF kid to get into these programs?
No, but DCF kids got favored placement. Okay, because DCF paid us a lot of money per head, and we qualified a lot of the kids that came to us. There was a program that George Bush and Joe Lieberman put the budget axe to that was called Youth Opportunities. It was a Bill Clinton era 1999 2000 youth development program. And basically the goal was to get $15 million and provide wraparound services to 1,100 people or 1,100 kids. And so we got yo money. And we tried to build it out. And basically, after we built it a couple of years, by March of 2003, we had a pretty spectacular newsroom running. And unfortunately, there was a disagreement between Bob and Alan. Like, I really wanted to take Echoes from the Streets and create a not-for-profit that would outlive me.
I kind of remember a little bit about that because there was well, you're about to get to it. I know you are. So go ahead.
And so there was Bob Rath fired Alan, fired Fahad Vahidi. I don't know if y'all know Fahad, but Fahad is one of the kindest, most compassionate people. And Bob was not nice to Fahad when he walked him out of the office. And when they did that, I knew my time was limited. So I just I give a rat's ass.
Yeah.
I'm going to do what I can to protect my relationship with students. It was just ugly. I one day I showed up to the newsroom that I built and I locked out. There was a security guard there. And I was like, but I built this office. He's like, but you can't come in. So the idea of being an at-will employee for a not-for-profit, the poverty industrial complex exists to perpetuate poverty.
It was really weird what happened because they offered Miss Wimbush a contract and she turned it down afterwards.
Yeah.
Because she was afraid that they were going to do to her what they did to you. And I was like, kind of right. You had just published something about, I wrote something against the death penalty. You had just published it. Man, I was on a high. And then I'm like, oh, because I was out from Long Lane at that point. And you,
we were 10 years away from outlawing the penalty in Connecticut. Right? We outlawed the penalty, and I say we because a lot of people who push for it, and take some credit for putting it out there. But by 2012, the death penalty was outlawed in the state of Connecticut.
Yeah,
Gary Stonehill did a lot of the heavy on that in the legislature, but there were plenty of people who pushed to make that happen. So, and then outlawed solitary confinement, right? That took a big push, and now William, Office of the Attorney General, the legislature passed a bill that outlaws solitary confinement.
It took them a while, though, so I've got to say that it's like they really fought against it, and I'm not sure why.
They did, because the Correctional Officers Union has an immense amount of power in the legislature, and it's amazing to me that the interests of a small group of people can control policy like that. But William Tong in the Office of the Attorney General, there are a number of people who did 20 plus years of solitary confinement at Northern Correctional Institute because they were on death row or they were otherwise difficult prisoners. And now that the legislature has outlawed solitary confinement and the governor has signed the bill and the Department of Corrections says, yeah, we think solitary confinement isn't the direction that we want to go in. And they recognize the Mandela rule. And there are certain approaches that the DOC is taking, but one of them is to not have any quarter against the people that they consigned to solitary for 20 years at Northern. And so William Tong's office is still litigating very hard against people like Richard Reynolds. And it's difficult to understand how that particular arm of the government, the office of the attorney general, the lawyer for the state, can sit there and say, yes, everybody understands that the policy of solitary confinement that occurred for 20 years in Northern is bad. It was torture, actually. But the office of the attorney general is still fighting it. They took a case to the Second Circuit. There's a Richard Reynolds case is heading to trial. I have a case. I was assigned as counsel for a guy named Daniel Webb. Daniel Webb was on death row for a pretty heinous murder. Same as Richard Reynolds on death row for a pretty heinous murder. And they had these special conditions that nobody else had because they were on death row. And after they repealed the death penalty, they created a more stringent series of conditions of confinement, which were really outrageous. And
it was the pods, right?
Yeah, the pods at Northern. But beyond that, though, like Daniel Webb and Richard Reynolds couldn't walk anywhere in prison without being ankle cuffed, handcuffed, and being attached at the belt too. They had to be in full shackles. They only were out of their cells for an hour a day, if that, to shower and do recreation. And their recreation was basically in a dog kennel in the middle of a yard. And they, in the wintertime, they couldn't wear jackets and they couldn't go to the bathroom when they were in the dog kennel. Like, really inhumane.
So I have questions from someone who knows a little bit about the inside, but has not been in Northern. Are they the same restrictions on death row that it would be in SRG or worse?
So death row was worse than SRG because, as I said, like, they had these additional conditions of confinement where you had to stay in your cell like 23 hours a day. And there were all sorts of additional rules. They couldn't have pictures on their wall. They couldn't have certain things. And this went on for years. So our litigation, the hepatitis C class action, forced the state of Connecticut to spend $40 million curing and treating and testing for hepatitis C. They tested 20,000 people and they treated 1,000 people. And Tony Walker, the state representative from New Haven, has been very clear that that lawsuit helped them redirect the Northern correctional budget into healthcare. And now what's left of death row, they sort of created a very high security unit at McDougal Walker. But
is it similar to the conditions over at Corrigan? Because I heard Corrigan be making people go crazy.
Corrigan is rough. All of them are rough. I mean, let's put it into context. In 1980, the state of Connecticut had 3,000 prisoners. It had 3.5 million people. Connecticut's population has been pretty consistent over the last 40 years. You know, it's dropped a little, it's raised a little, it's dropped a little, it's raised a little, but it always stays at like 3.5. But it only had 3,000 people in jail in 1980. By 2006, it has 21,000 people in jail.
I was going to visit one of them. Holy smokes.
Like, how do we explain a 7-fold increase in prison population in 26 years?
The Tomasos.
No. Ronald Reagan.
Oh, well, yeah, that too. I'm just thinking
the war on drugs and the war on drugs and you know, the Southern strategy of law and order. All of these sort of very racist concepts congeal together to create this system of mass incarceration. And Dan Malloy gets it down to about 8,000 or 9,000 people, and then COVID hits and the courts grind to a halt. I have a criminal case that I'm still dealing with from 2019.
Ooh, I just resolved tickets from June 2020 traffic tickets. So I want to say I feel
that's it.
Yours is worse.
It shouldn't take 2 years to resolve or 3 years to resolve certain things, but COVID ground everything to a halt. And Ned Lamont has got sort of a jailer's hand. And Angel Quiros, the commissioner of the Department of Correction, is an insider.
Wasn't he originally a prison guard over it? I want to say somewhere by the shoreline. Maybe
No, he was the warden at
Enfield.
Northern. He was the warden at Northern for some of this. So one of the reasons that I think they're fighting the Northern solitary cases is because it's Angel Quiros and he's the client. So the thing is, it doesn't make sense as you're looking from the outside to sit there and say, why is the state defending a policy that it is already acknowledged through the legislature is wrong? Right? They've walked back. Whoops, it was a mistake for us to throw people in a box the size of a grave, basically 7 feet by 3 feet. It was a mistake for us to do that. So why are we still litigating it? Because, and this is something that I want to do if I'm Attorney General, is initiate billable hours. Okay, so when you sign up with a lawyer, you keep when you get a lawyer, he keeps his or she keeps their time in 6-minute increments. So if it takes me 3.4 hours, 3 hours and 24 minutes to write a motion to dismiss, that's what I bill for. Okay.
Yeah.
So my $375 an hour is multiplied by 3.4, and that's the cost of your motion to dismiss. My paralegal bills it $110 an hour. And like when I win a motion for attorney's fees because I've sanctioned the Office of the Attorney General for discovery misconduct, I have to submit an affidavit of attorney's fees to the court explaining my time and explaining why I'm entitled to $375 an hour because a lawyer of my skill and experience, and this is a complex case, there's an entire body of law about paying attorney's fees. So when you're a private client, say you bought a business from somebody and there was a breach of contract in the sale of the business and you need to sue them and you give me $20,000 to do this lawsuit, I have to make choices as a litigator as to where we're going to put those resources and how we're going to do the lawsuit. If I think that it's a losing battle because you don't have certain facts and they don't meet certain criteria within the law, and I'm going to say to you, why don't we try and mediate it? Why don't we take your $20,000 budget and hire a good mediator, like a retired judge at a white shoe firm in Hartford, for $5,000 or $10,000, and we'll get a better outcome through negotiations than litigation.
Yeah.
So if state agencies have to make decisions based on the budgets of litigation as opposed to a bottomless well of money, state agencies will approach policy in the way that they enact policy different. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but that also seems like not only would it shift around certain decisions being made, but this could save potentially a lot of money.
Exactly, because so Alex Taubes, do you know Alex?
I am a fan of his. I've shown up to a ton of his cases and we shared the same birthday.
Oh, you do? Alex is your birthday buddy, huh?
Yep, he was born November 8th.
Oh, you're a Scorpio, are you?
Yes, I am. That's kind of like why I couldn't read the water sign off of you because, I'm looking in the mirror, but I picked up that other stuff off you.
So, Alex had a case where a prison guard was accused of forcing a female prison guard was accused of forcing a male prison inmate to masturbate in front of her. And he sued and said, this is sexual harassment. And, they defended the guard to the nth degree. Let's talk about Kara Tangretti's case, because that's one that just drives me insane.
Now, just to remind everyone, he's running for attorney general, and these are cases that he's litigated against or that people aligned with us have litigated. So they've fought on the right side of these cases.
Yes. So I'm trying to focus on cases that aren't mine. Oh, because I can talk about my cases all day, and everybody will say, after
the commercial break, we're definitely going to be talking about some of your cases.
So, but what I don't want to do is sit there and say I'm a better, like my campaign for attorney general is based only on my litigation. No, Karatine Grady was represented by Koskoff, and Biter, who are the people who are representing the Sandy Hook families right now in Waterbury against Alex Jones. Okay, so the attorney for Karatine Grady was a guy named Antonio Ponver, who is one of the best, smartest attorneys in the state. And Antonio just took the state for $36 million for the guy in Whiting who was abused on camera. I don't know if you remember that.
Oh, Whiting Forensic.
Yeah, Whiting Forensic, that case where the guy was like assaulted regularly on camera by people, and Antonio took the state for $36 million. So, Karatine Grady is sexually assaulted, raped by three prison guards at York at different times, and she's sexually assaulted by a fourth. And those four guards were caught, prosecuted, and incarcerated themselves because there's a power imbalance, and they used it to get sex off of somebody, and they couldn't, and it was rape. But she can't sue them because they have no money anymore. And
but
I think you and I would agree that if four prison guards are doing something illegal to the same person, it's a systematic issue.
Right. The state of Connecticut should be footing the bill.
Exactly. So because of the terrible state of constitutional law in the United States, there's a fiction called sovereign immunity, and you can't sue the state
unless the state gives permission.
And that's it. That's the claims commissioner. So
the ombudsman or something.
Antonio Ponver sued individual actors like the correctional supervisor, like Scott Semple, the commissioner of the Department of Corrections. He sued the individuals who were in charge of these correctional officers and who went up the chain of command. This is in keeping with the Nuremberg tribunal results, in which just taking orders is not an excuse. Right. And the people who issued those orders are held accountable. So the post-World War II model of structural systematic accountability that came out of Nuremberg, prosecuted by Connecticut's own Thomas Dodd, right? That model allowed you to hold supervisors accountable for human rights violations that happened on their watch. Okay, the war on terror comes after 9/11.
Right.
And George Bush and Donald Rumsfeld create this architecture at Guantanamo Bay. Yep. They have this extraordinary rendition program where they just grab random people off the streets in Pakistan or Egypt or Syria or Germany or Italy, and then they send them to black sites, and then they end up in Guantanamo Bay. And one of these prisoners in Guantanamo Bay sued Donald Rumsfeld and said, "You're discriminating against me because I'm Muslim." And in 2007 or 2008, a decision came out of the John Roberts Supreme Court that said a prisoner, and I can't think of the case right now because Iqbal versus Rumsfeld. A prisoner like Iqbal has to prove that Donald Rumsfeld knew Mr. Iqbal and directly participated in Mr. Iqbal's discrimination. Okay, so there has to be a knowledge of the supervisor, of the individual, participate in it, and understand the harm. Okay, if we take that back to Nuremberg, that means the commandant at Auschwitz can say, 30,000 Jews died in my death chamber today. I didn't know a single one of them. I didn't participate in it. I didn't pull the chamber. I didn't pull the...
Right. That's like, I'm thinking, how the fuck are you supposed to prosecute Hitler at this point?
So
Charles Manson would have gone free.
Iqbal versus, well, I don't think it applies to Charles Manson, but Iqbal versus Rumsfeld.
The spirit of it.
It wiped out supervisory liability. So the legal architecture of the war on terror created a netherworld so that the people like John Yoo, who approved waterboarding, that like George Bush, who approved these extraordinary renditions, like Dick Cheney, who approved Guantanamo Bay.
You mean the real president at the time?
All of these people will never be held accountable under Iqbal versus Rumsfeld because the Supreme Court simply said, we don't think that we think that supervisory liability cannot happen unless the person has a direct hand and knows you, the person who's suffering individually.
So that makes it damn near impossible to sue the state because...
So the Second Circuit, which is what Connecticut is in, did not have that decision, did not adopt the logic of Iqbal versus Rumsfeld. And this is going to get very lawyery and technical, but Iqbal versus Rumsfeld is the posture on a motion to dismiss. Okay? It's not on a motion to dismiss, which is much later in the day. What's that noise?
That's me muting Assad.
Oh.
Because Assad, his phone was ringing.
So the architecture of the war on terror creates this lack of accountability in high levels of government that create these policies that are human rights violations. Connecticut, that law didn't necessarily apply to it because the Second Circuit hadn't applied it to prison. Like the 8th Circuit and the 11th Circuit had already applied it. The Second Circuit was an outlier for many years. Kara Tangretti survived one piece of her case against one of the supervisors. Okay. What did William Tong's office do? They appealed to the Second Circuit.
For what?
We don't even want this one supervisor to be held accountable. And the Second Circuit, 2 Trump-appointed judges wrote a decision that applied the logic of Iqbal to Kara Tangretti's case. So Kara Tangretti cannot hold anyone accountable for getting repeatedly raped by correctional officers.
Wait. So pretty much the supervisor can look the other way at this point in the same manner. Whoa! No wonder protesters have been having such a hard time over at Keystone Healthcare in Bloomfield.
No, it's got to be a state agency. Right? I don't know if Keystone is a state agency, but I think they're like contracted with them. But that's so. The question is why does William Tong and the Democratic Party in general need to use the legal weapons of the war on terror against the citizens of the state of Connecticut? I don't have an answer for that, and I'm puzzled as to why the Office of the Attorney General thinks it's important to use weapons developed in litigation and legal theories developed in litigation to fight the war on terror against people who grew up here in Connecticut.
That's a really good question.
That's a really good point.
It's troubling me, and I've thought about this a lot. And so let's pull back to a 50,000-foot view. Scott Semple, the commissioner of the Department of Correction in 2016, gets an email from somebody, and I have the email. I can show
They're using it in self-defense of personal interest.
He gets this email that says there's a dentist in Cheshire Correctional who's pulling teeth instead of filling cavities. That is a clear constitutional violation.
Holy shit, what?
Okay. Scott Semple knows about this. I get him in a deposition in 2019, and I say 2020, and I say, this email is kind of nuts, isn't it? Like, there's a dentist in Cheshire pulling teeth. Commissioner, did you ever do any investigation and find out how many people had their teeth pulled? Nope. Did this dentist ever get punished? Nope. Did you ever change policy? Nope. Okay. Iqbal and Tangretti, the 2 decisions together, mean that anybody who lost their teeth in Cheshire could not sue Scott Semple for his negligence in failing to root out the constitutional violation. Right?
And basically, William Tong is sitting here defending these people. This is fucking dangerous.
Here's the
thing. He's playing nice with the Sacklers.
So here's another one. Okay. There was something called the Utilization Review Committee in the Connecticut Department of Correction Medical System. Okay, and I don't know if you're familiar with utilization review, but it's something that comes out of HMOs, health management organizations. And basically it's a roadblock, it's a gate, it's a sort of gatekeeper designed to screen people from getting more.
Nice with the Sacklers.
What's that? Okay, fine.
So
Somebody's got a big
here's
delay.
another. Okay. There was
Assad,
something called
yeah.
Utilization Review Committee in the Connecticut Department of Correction Medical System.
You want to, all right, there you go. So the crazy thing is the Utilization Review Committee was understood by the Office of the Attorney General in 2015, 16, and 17 to be a systematic roadblock to the early detection of cancers in prison, specifically head and neck cancers. Specifically, we have to understand that people who are in prison have a high incidence of head and neck cancers because alcohol and tobacco use are accelerants for head and neck cancers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the Utilization Review Committee would regularly deny external consults to people who were suffering from cancer-like symptoms.
So death panels.
If you want to call them that. So the Attorney General's office knew in 2015, Scott Semple knew, his director of medical knew, all of these people knew that the URC was a death sentence for people who had cancer-like symptoms because the URC was not getting them in time. And then you get a guy like Billy Bennett, who happens to be one of my clients. Billy had stage 4 squamous cell carcinoma of his larynx that wasn't detected until it choked him. And Billy died 11 months later when it was fine. It was diagnosed in January of 2017, and he died in November of 2017. And he died a horrible, awful death. He was tortured for months with lack of medical care. Tangretti means that even though I know that Scott Semple and the Office of the Attorney General understood that URCs were death sentences, it's highly likely that I'm going to lose Billy's case against Scott Semple.
Because they're using rules from the War on Terror to violate these people's constitutional rights?
You said it. You said it. It's extraordinarily frustrating to understand that everybody knew the URC was a deadly instrument. Billy was denied ENT consults by the URC. He was denied an MRI by the URC.
Are they doing this on purpose?
Cost cutting. I mean, there was a budget and they had to meet it, and like, you see what it like. This is why we need an attorney general who centers human rights and not protecting executive police power.
It's such an oxymoron to use the Constitution against constitutional rights.
Yeah.
Weaponize the Constitution against itself, essentially.
Yeah, that's it. They weaponize it. I mean, Assad, look, like the Constitution is Swiss cheese. And everybody's pretty clear on it. Everybody has seen that, like, it's very difficult to hold the cops who kill Eric Garner or Philando Castile or Tamir Rice or Brittany. Sorry, I was going to say Brittany Griner. I'm like, no, that's Russia. I can't. You're muted, Evilise. So, this is
They fucking up over in Russia, though. Let's not.
Oh my God! Holy cow! We have a little guest here. We have a little guest.
Who's that?
Aveline. Aveline, do you say hi to Assad and Evelyn?
Hi.
Aren't you supposed to be in bed? Do you want to say hi?
What are you doing outside?
No, it's time for you to go to bed. How did you get down here?
Let me get my charger before my phone dies.
What's that? Okay, I love you, baby. Oh, okay. Go upstairs. That was quite a surprise. She just crawled right under the table. You were quiet.
How old is she now?
She's 5, Assad. She's
Hold on.
5.
Well, my little one's
Assad.
2 now.
What happens if you keep your phone? Can you talk real quick? Because I think you're on talk.
He's muted, but there's
Okay.
definitely a delay.
Yeah, there is. Hey, all right, you're unmuted, Assad.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes. But you see there's a delay.
that's
There's
quite
like
a
a
delay.
7-second delay.
Hold on
Yeah.
1 second.
There is.
So it's
I have full Wi-Fi here.
it's all right.
Hold on.
Damn.
All right, go ahead.
So one of the things that I really like about having hour-long conversations like we're having right now. So Assad, can you mute yourself? Because then we hear everything you say back.
Okay.
So you're on mute, Evelise.
I need Assad to exit and enter. And while we do that, I'm going to show you a picture while we wait for Assad and you explain that case.
Yeah. So, well, no, what I'm saying is like, so you see, it took me 15 minutes to get through Tangredi because it requires a large amount of background, and it's an in-depth situation that it takes a little bit to understand the actual impact of what is going on. And like, so somebody at the highest level of the Office of the Attorney General made the decision to appeal that case to the Second Circuit, understanding what the policy was going to be. And that's troublesome. It's really bothersome.
That's scary.
Yeah. They knew what they were doing. And you know, I hope that we can get into a debate and talk about these issues. I mean, I am certain that nobody wants me on a debate stage because
you're a nightmare to them.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, you give them the same feeling you gave Jody Rell.
Yeah, nobody, you know, I'm okay being the black sheep. I'm okay being the unpopular kid at the party who says, hey, this punch doesn't taste right. You know what I'm saying? I'm okay with that. I'm comfortable where I am. And, you know, I want to center human rights. And when I say human rights, I'm talking about economic rights. I'm talking about civil rights. I'm talking about privacy rights, emotional rights, you know, the entire panoply of rights expressed in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It's a broader document than the United States Constitution, which we're seeing is a really troubled document that needs updating. And the Universal Declaration of Human Rights seems to me a broader statement as to what our North Star should be as we sail into the 21st century and sort of deal with life as it is. I mean, we have a rising fascist tide. The fascists have won in Sweden.
Brazil, I believe, as well.
Brazil. They just won in Italy.
And yeah, that's right.
You got to love it when girl boss Hillary Clinton congratulates girl boss Italian Mussolini for breaking the glass ceiling of being.
Wait, are you talking about the granddaughter that Jim Carrey got into an argument with?
No, I'm not sure. I don't know about that, but you know, like it's bad when Hillary Clinton is congratulating a fascist because she broke a glass ceiling. It's like, you know, Hungary is fascist, Russia is fascist. There's this massive tide of anti-democratic sentiment, and you know, I don't think the Democrats are equipped to deal with it because they've been using the tools of fascism like in Tangretti, and B, they've been appeasing the Republican Party and treating the Republican Party as equals when the Republican Party has shown us for the last 20 years, if not 40 years, that it's openly hostile to elections.
I really want from the Democrats the energy that Republicans give their base. The Green Party is really what the Republicans accuse Democrats of being.
Yes, and the Green Party is it's, you know, there's been so much oppression against minor parties and third parties for the last 40 years that it's difficult for parties to build. I mean, what does it tell people about third parties when somebody like me gets arrested for being a third party activist? And for people who aren't familiar, I put the first black man on the ballot for governor in 2006. It was Cliff Thornton, and we wanted to legalize cannabis. We wanted to end the war on drugs, and we wanted to provide reparations to the communities that were harmed by the war on drugs. We were right. We were 100% right. And we had a ton of other policies that were great ideas too. Infrastructure, free college tuition, eradicating student loans.
Side note, what's your website so we can put it down in the comments?
I don't have a website. I don't have the time.
Damn you.
I mean, people can
I will do it for you.
What's that?
I will do it for you. I just need to finish some graphics for Michelle.
Yeah, no, it's, I mean, if you want to, it's one of those things where it's like, there's 30 days left or 35 days left in the campaign.
My dad won his election and he signed up for the ballot 2 months in advance.
Yeah. Like, I just like, they asked me to do this and I couldn't do it. We were moving, you know, we just moved to New Haven. Look, there's still construction stuff behind me because we're not fully moved in. And we're still doing construction, but we, I only took this in like the end of August, and the Green Party signed me up. You know, the Green Party voted on August 29th, and we submitted the letter to the Secretary of State on like September 6th. So it's a 2-month, and personally, I think that 60-day campaigns should be the norm. They can do a full-on parliamentary election, and like in England, in a parliamentary system, the prime minister can call an election. They can host a national election in 60 days notice. So the question is why do we need, like, I understand the necessity of perpetual democracy, but the thing is perpetual democracy where you have primaries, elections, and all of these things, like in Puerto Rico, they have elections once every 4 years for every office. Here in let's look at Hartford or New Haven. In Hartford, you have a mayoral election in 2014. You have a gubernatorial election in 2015. You have, mayoral in 2013, gubernatorial in 2014, nothing in 2015, maybe 1 or 2 Board of Ed seats.
Oh, primaries, right?
Yes. And then within those cycles, you have primaries and generals, and there's a lot of voting required. There's a lot of participation required. We do not have a constitutional amendment that requires you to vote like they do in Australia. So people who run urban machines like 10% turnout because then they can control the ballot, right? And if you do things like they tried to do in Hartford with charter revision this year and create geographical representation to create a more responsive government, it gets turned down by the powers that be. So we have a Democratic Party that's not responsive to more participation and more choices and more voices. And we have a Republican Party that doesn't even subscribe to the rule of law anymore. A majority of the Republican congressmen voted to object to the counting of the Electoral College, which in itself is a vestige of slavery, right? So we don't even, like, we need to be looking at a guide star. We need to center.
You're not allowed to vote, but we're going to count 3/5 of you.
Yeah, but you know what I'm saying? Like the Electoral College is like, okay, you know, and not only that, like North Dakota and South Dakota were created to put more senators in rural areas. It could be one state. It could have just been Dakota, but they made it 2 states so they could have 4 senators instead of 2, and they could stack the senators for the rural areas, which were conservative. You know, there's that whole Marxian dialectic where urban areas are generally liberal and socialist, and rural areas are generally conservative and reactionary.
Very true.
And so, we have this entire system. And in 2006, I pissed off Jody Rell. And on her inaugural parade, I got targeted, thrown in jail for 13 hours on $75,000 bond. And I'm sitting there in jail saying, what the fuck did I just do? I have no idea what I did, but something fucked up is going on. And, I got through it by thinking about people like Peter Tosh and singing songs in my head and just, and 13 hours isn't a long time, but Alexander.
It fucks with you. Trust me.
What's that?
It fucks with you. Trust me.
Well, Alexander Solzhenitsyn says the actual cataclysm isn't how long you do in prison. It's when they walk up behind you and hiss in your ear, you're under arrest. When they steal your liberty and demonstrate to you that your liberty is not yours, but a gift that they're giving to you. When you have that earthquake, that's the real cataclysm. I was talking to somebody on the train about it today. I don't like to talk about it because it still makes me angry 15 years later. I lost my lawsuit. The charges were dropped and I filed a civil rights lawsuit under false arrest, and a jury told me to pound sand. They said the police should be able to arrest you for taking pictures of Jody Rell. I'm one of the only lawyers in the last 50 years to depose a sitting governor. Or she wasn't sitting, but she was retired. She was resigned at that time, but I deposed a governor. I made her sit, because if you look at the pictures that I took that day, she's looking right at me. She's a witness. She saw 6 cops standing behind me, waiting to arrest me as soon as she passed.
She's a dick.
Ain't a fan. Although she did create public campaign financing. However, third parties cannot participate in public campaign financing on a statewide level because the bar is so high. I'd have to collect 200,000 signatures. And you saw that Muad Harizi couldn't even collect 4,000 signatures this year.
Yeah, I mean, he collected more. I think they disqualified a lot of them on purpose, if you want my honest opinion.
Yeah, of course they do. Of course. I mean, it's such a crazy system. In Louisiana, you can pay $500 to get on the ballot. You don't need to collect signatures in Louisiana. In some states,
I could become governor of Louisiana with $500.
No, you can get on the ballot to run for governor with $500. Ballot access is a huge concern. Connecticut, if you think about what Alex Taubes and Muad Harizi did in that.
Oh yeah, Harizi definitely got fucked. That was stolen from him.
Yeah, and they tried very clearly. Alex and Muad tried very clearly to articulate the problems. Connecticut has very restrictive ballot access laws, and
John Fonfara is a fan of that.
Well, everybody is. All the Democrats are. Does some Democrat want an asshole like me collecting signatures? No, they don't want to. So the only way I could run as a Democrat is if I spent every waking moment from January till May, and maybe even from September until May, the last 9 months, calling delegates to the state Democratic Central Committee and getting them to vote for me on the floor of the state convention in May. If you recall, in 2006, Ned Lamont had millions of dollars so he could buy petition signatures if he needed to. He needed to collect like 32,000 signatures in like 6 weeks of only registered Democrats if he didn't get 15% at the convention against Joe Lieberman. He managed to get 15% at the convention against Joe Lieberman and famously led a revolt in the Democratic Party that led to Nancy.
Oh, yeah, the independent.
That led to Lieberman running as an independent and Nancy Pelosi becoming Speaker of the House. And he created, Ned Lamont created the tide of anti-war sentiment. Or I wouldn't say created, but he definitely, because the anti-war sentiment was there, but he gave it an electoral presence. But he only did that because he had $50 million of his own money to spend. If the state of Connecticut was really concerned about generating competitive elections, they would make campaign financing and ballot access easier for third parties like me. In the meantime, I sit here and say, I can't really take a break from my practice because I got to pay a mortgage. I got to pay my paralegal. I got to pay malpractice. I got to do all these. Who's got time to campaign?
But you're doing your best.
And so what do? Is I sneak an hour here or there and I do interviews with some press and hopefully the record that I built over the last 20 years convinces people that, hey, Krayeske can handle a law firm of 175 people. What's important to note is, do you know Adam Osmond? I don't know if anybody's seen Adam Osmond. He's on Twitter. He's had his own battles with the state of Connecticut. He's got a thing that he created, that the state of Connecticut created, and I'm not quite sure how it works, but it's through the Office of the Comptroller, and it shows that the Office of the Attorney General in the last 10 years hasn't really hired any Black attorneys. And you're like, okay, well, that explains some of it.
It's not a surprise.
No,
to hear it, but
it's just like it's another metric for how unprogressive the office is.
It's the land of the steady habits.
Yeah, and there's so many things that could be done with the Office of the Attorney General, and I've been practicing law for 12 years, and I'm, so you have to practice law for 10 years to be qualified.
Nice.
I've been doing this for.
I'm going to have to interrupt you real quick because we do have to cut to a commercial break. But before I do that, I wanted to show you something from a mutual friend who has sent you something.
All right.
So let me share my screen really quickly so we can invite you. Where is it? Share screen. Share screen. We're going to share this. And I want you to tell me if you remember. Can you see it?
Oh, Cloud Splitter.
Yes. And
why does somebody have my ticket when I went to Cancun and Havana?
Because you used that as a bookmark and you gave it to Kimura.
Oh, no way. Really?
Yes.
Cloud Splitter's a great book. John Brown, there should be a statue to John Brown on Main Street in Hartford.
I actually wanted to replace the statue of John Mason at the Capitol with a statue of John Brown. However, the reason for that is because Kimura is personally inviting you to her birthday party on October 9th, and you'll get to meet the John Brown Gun Club while you're there.
So what time on October 9th? Because I have a baby's first birthday party.
2 to 8, and you can show up at any time. And if you can't show up that day, that's okay, because there's going to be a sleepover on the 8th for her birthday too.
So I'm going to be here in the evening on the 8th. I'll get there. There's a little 1-year-old little girl who is who I love with all. She's not mine. She's family, but she is this 1-year-old little girl is going to have a hard life. And I want to do everything that I can to support her. So I got to show up to her first birthday party because she's a fighter and I love her.
Absolutely.
So that's on the 9th. Well, wait, no, you said the 8th is her party?
Yeah. So the 8th is the sleepover. The 9th is the event. So it's from 2 to 8. And you can show up at any time to meet the John Brown Gun Club.
The 9th in the evening. John Brown was born in Torrington.
Yep. And we're actually looking to see if we could have the holiday observed as well. The first Monday of May.
May 9th.
Yeah. So no, second Monday of May.
Yeah, May 9th is John Brown's birthday. He shares a birthday with you ever heard of the Order of the White Rose? So they were German pacifists. And Sophie Scholl was the leader or one of the leaders of the Order of the White Rose. And she was a university student. And there's a great movie on YouTube called Sophie Scholl. It's in German, so you got to read it. Unless you do sprechen Sie Deutsch. I do not sprechen Sie Deutsch. So I had to
not much at all, like a couple of basic words.
But so Sophie Scholl was a pacifist, and her brother and some friends of hers sent pamphlets around in Germany in 1944 opposing the war, and she paid for it with her head. And her birthday is also John Brown's birthday.
What year?
Are both born on May 9th.
Something about those shorts. All right, so we're cutting
Yes.
for commercial break, and we'll be right back.
All right.
Practicing and living in community means that we're responsible to ourselves and others. It means that we're committed to engaging humbly and bravely with others who we may not agree with, but who share a similar worldview. Tensions and conflicts are gifts that allow us to grow together. Join our peaceful revolution.
And that was word from our sponsor, Kimura's Cultural Corner.
Hey, we love Kimura's Cultural Corner.
Yes. So usually we go for about 30 minutes. So whenever you want to hop off, by all means.
Yeah. So an hour is about my limit today. I've had, hold on. I have to sneeze.
Bless you. Gesundheit.
It went away. It's gonna hang here. So, you know, my aim in running for AG is to increase the conversation about human rights and to talk about what we do in this country when one of the parties in a structural two-party system no longer agrees with the structure and only thinks that elections matter when they win. If they don't win, the election is a fraud. If they do win, you know, the Republican Party has long been hostile to elections. There's solid evidence to show that Richard Nixon won in 1968 by cheating, with the you know, Henry Kissinger going to Paris and talking to the Vietnamese to negotiate, the North Vietnamese to negotiate with them instead of Lyndon Baines Johnson. In 1980,
that's dirty.
In 1980, there's very strong evidence that Ronald Reagan and his campaign in October, they call it the October Surprise, met with members of the Iranian government to prolong the hostage crisis to sink Jimmy Carter's re-election chances. You know, in 2000, we have the Supreme Court of the United States handing in a
burning the ballots.
Handing the you know, like, so, and then in 2016 we have very questionable things that happened, and then in 2021 we have an outright mob attack the United States Capitol.
So due to COVID, we actually kept our regime change in-house that year.
And so it's astonishing, and the Democratic Party is not equipped, to me, to help handle this direction. I just
all.
Okay, so even I love AOC, but she's gotten kind of soft.
I don't think she's gotten kind of soft. I think there's a certain culture that happens. I love what she's doing, and I love that she's there, and I love that the ground that she's opened up, and she's also stuck within a difficult system, and she's doing what she can. And the thing is, she's been marginalized.
She's been caged in.
Say that again?
She's been caged in.
And not only that, we don't know how many death threats she's had. And we don't know how.
Well, I mean, they were going to kill her in the insurrection.
Well, we don't know how those death threats impact the way that she's going to deal with something. And like, you know, she pulled off an amazing upset. And, you know, I appreciate that she's there and she's important, and, you know, it's difficult. Democracy requires making compromises that nobody likes. And she's at least at the table. You know, a friend of mine, after I got arrested in 2007 for that Jody Rell bullshit, it was trying to make light of the situation. She said, look, 500 years ago, they would have just chopped your head off.
That's also true.
And so I sit here and say, you know, progress comes in fits and starts. And, you know, like, we've only had women's suffrage in this country for a century. We've really only had a fully representative, or I don't even know if I'd call it fully, but, like, you know, the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Acts in the 1960s that Lyndon Baines Johnson signed created a golden age of civil rights that, to me, ends on 9/11. You know, so maybe in the 250-year history of our country, we've had 35 years of genuine, or at least closer to, the ideal of representative democracy than
Yeah, 35, 36, because housing segregation was still legal when me and Assad were born.
yeah, but
Yeah.
the thing is, like, there's so much that's still legal that's really terrible. But like, if we look at the larger picture,
Mhm.
and we look at, like, let's say student free speech, okay. In 1969, you have John and Mary Beth Tinker, two Quakers going to school in Des Moines, Iowa, and they wear black armbands to school to protest the Tet Offensive. Thurgood Marshall is sitting on the Supreme Court, and he writes an opinion that says, hey, as long as it doesn't disrupt school activities and they created the speech on the outside, they can speak in school. There's no way that decision gets written today. In 2007, 38 years later, you have Joe Fredericks in Juneau, Douglas, Alaska, carries a sign across the street from an Olympic torch rally at his school that says "Bong hits for Jesus." Have you seen this?
I haven't, but
I've
it sounds awesome.
So
I've
Joe
seen it.
Fredericks is like a junior in high school, and it's actually, the typography is a reference to Pikel by Alexander Shulgin, and Pikel stands for phenylethylenes I have known and loved. Pikel, Pikhal. It's spelled all capital P, little I, all capital Khal. And it's a book about how to manufacture ecstasy and LSD and other things, and what the effects of all of these molecules within the LSD MDMA family tree are. And Shulgin experiments on himself, and he's somewhat of a cult hero because he wrote this. And so Joe Fredericks uses the model of Pikel, and he writes "Bong hits for Jesus," and he stands across the street, and the school principal walks across the street, rips the banner down, and he says "free speech," and she's like, "No," and he says, "But Thomas Jefferson," and she says, "No," and he gets suspended for 10 days. And he sues. He loses at the district court. He wins at the Ninth Circuit. It goes up to the Supreme Court. Ken Starr does the arguments for Juneau Douglas School District.
Of course he does.
And who won?
Ken Starr.
Yeah. Clarence
Fuck
Thomas
that
was
dude.
a concurrence that supported corporal punishment. Clarence Thomas was like, this teacher didn't go far enough. She should have beat him, essentially. And so you're saying, so if we look at decisions like students' free speech as vectors of what a free society is, and I think you and I could agree, all three of us could agree that
I would have to throw hands with the teacher as my free speech. Holy shit.
But student speech is an important issue that means a lot to all of us. And so if we look at that as
My
just
own
a
child
point.
organized walkouts for gun violence back in the 7th grade. Yeah.
But so did you see that they organized a walkout in Maryland, and press wasn't allowed to cover it near schools? Like this week, there was a huge series of student walkouts in Maryland against Larry Hogan's LGBTQ policies. And press was prevented from covering many of these walkouts. And it's just, so it's like student free speech to me is a data point that we can track the rightward swing of the pendulum towards, fascism, whatever you want to call it. Like, and some people
Now, do you think this is a return to like more of the 1920s after after Woodrow Wilson? Because to me, historically, it feels kind of like that.
I don't know. The Palmer raids were pretty nasty things. And the anti-Red Scare, those were basically like, let's round up people like Sacco and Vanzetti and jail them or kill them. So that's why I'm like, all right. So no, Woodrow Wilson was a virulent racist. He was a KKK member. He wasn't a nice man. Does it feel like that? Yeah, absolutely. It feels like we're turning the clock back. There are people who want to remove the 19th Amendment, which is women's suffrage. So like, Gilead, here we come, right? And I for one am not a fan, but like, it's we need strong leaders who are not afraid to take risks and who have been tested in crucibles to lead us in a time when the Democrats are complicit in this fall off a cliff towards fascism.
Joe
And
Manchin,
well, it's not even, but it's little things like William Tong and the Tangretti decision,
yeah,
or big things like Kirsten Sinema, or it's bigger things like Barack Obama incinerating Anwar al-Awlaki's son, who was 16 years old and an American citizen in Yemen. You know what I'm saying? Like, so Anwar al-Awlaki's son was an American citizen with all the due process rights. He was not an emancipated minor. He was in a car with his dad, who was an Al-Qaeda higher up, and Barack Obama wanted him dead. So they drone striked a Toyota Tercel carrying Anwar al-Awlaki and his son. And so a 16-year-old boy born in New Mexico was incinerated by an American drone, green-lighted by Obama, because we didn't like his dad.
Jesus Christ.
Those drone strikes.
Yeah. So, like, is it?
Oh
is
yeah,
it,
I mean, look at Dorner though. So I mean, when they want you, they want you. It's horrible.
So he was killed in 2011, and you know, Anwar al-Awlaki was also born in New Mexico. So he you know, like, Barack Obama killed 2 American citizens. You know, the Anwar al-Awlaki's son is far more egregious than his dad, right? I mean, nobody likes the fact, and I think it's a terrible thing, but you know, it's just tough because you have these Democrats using the architecture of the war on terror to create the same constitutional violations that they claim that they're against when the Republicans do it.
Republicans really fought against certain changes in cannabis law, which surprised me. I know it was a lot of political posturing here.
Yeah,
but it really fucking bothered me that Representative O'Day made more sense than fucking DeAugustino.
Well, what's really frustrating to me is at the end of the day, somebody like Art Linares, who
oh my god,
real pain in the Connecticut Senate about this for years.
He got the dispensary.
And he got a dispensary. Like, it's just, you know, Connecticut is corrupted for a reason.
Oh yeah, we have INSA Connecticut now as a social equity provider as well. You know, INSA Massachusetts, INSA Connecticut just happens to be, you know, some sort of coincidence, you know, along with former employees of the DCP, some white dude from Wallingford.
Yeah, Abdul Rahman al-Awlaki was killed on October 14th, 2011.
And he was a little boy. Well, I mean,
he was 16. No. And I'm sorry, they weren't in a Toyota Tercel. They were killed while eating dinner at an outdoor restaurant in Yemen.
Oh my goodness.
So 2 Hellfire missiles came out of a drone and knocked out a restaurant. And rather than going to arrest Anwar al-Awlaki, the war on terror and the architecture of the war on terror suspended rights of American citizens. And Barack Obama killed 2 American citizens without due process of law. There's a death sentence that he gave them, and he abrogated all of their constitutional rights. So the Democrats do it just the same as the Republicans, and which is why they can't necessarily be trusted to fight the Republicans when it comes to protecting us from Republican fascism and their overreach against the rule of law.
Republicans in support of gay marriage.
It's too much. So listen, this was fun. I look forward to seeing you all. I'm a little tired. It's 10 o'clock.
Same.
So is there a link? Does this get?
Yes, it's on Twitter. It's on Facebook and YouTube Live.
All right. And so you'll send me a link. Will you one of you guys tweet me a link, please?
Yeah, can you just text me real quick and I'll send you
Well,
all
you have
three
my
links.
Twitter on like at Ken Krayeske, whatever. I'll text you, remind you, whatever. We'll do it. Hey, this was fun. Thank you everybody for watching.
All right.
We'll talk soon.
Peace.
All right. Good night, y'all.
Good night. Peace.